Next up is the first of our Prideside Chats, hosted by Renee Von Medding, CEO of the non-profit organisation Equality for Children. Renee is joined by two same-sex couples, Kevin Higgins and Kevin Egan, and Sarah and Joe Perry, to discuss LGBT plus parenting in Ireland and explain their own journey to becoming parents.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cork Pride's 2021 Prideside Chat. I'm joined today by two sets of wonderful parents, Kevin and Kevin, and Joe and Sarah. And today we're going to be talking about LGBTQ plus parenting in Ireland. So Kevin and Kevin, I'm going to come to you first. If you could maybe just introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about your journey to parenthood.
So I'm Kevin Higgins, or as our kids call me, Daddy.
And I'm Kevin Egan, and I'm known as Dad.
And our journey started to becoming a family in 2007.
Yeah.
So in 2007, we had a civil partnership. So we were living in England, in the UK at the time. We'd moved from Ireland in the early noughties. And in 2007, kind of late 2007, we expressed, we started considering, how will we become a family and how will that work? And we kind of looked at all the options that were available to us at the time in England. Everything from surrogacy to having some friends support us maybe through carrying a child, etc. And adoption was the one that kind of stuck out the most for us. Also as well, we had a kind of a high awareness of adoption at the time. The legislation had just changed in the UK. There was a lot of, promotion that same-sex couples could adopt. So it was very, very exciting. We were one of the first handful of couples to adopt, same-sex couples to adopt in the local authority that we lived in. And we went on that route. It took us about just over 2 years from making the initial inquiry to the adoption team to our first son, Adam, being placed with us. He was 23 months old, and he came to live with us in early 2010. So it was just over 2 years from start to finish.
Wow.
It was, we had a few challenges at the beginning of the journey. The first agency that we approached that had a great reputation at placing children with families did have a religious affiliation with them. And unfortunately, they turned us away. They just suggested at the time that they weren't, what was the words they used, I think?
They weren't really compatible.
Compatible. And did that stop you in your journey at all, or were you forget about them?
Paused us for a while.
Okay.
I think it
knocked us a little bit.
And
I think we are we doing the right thing? We questioned ourselves more. I think maybe probably beat ourselves up a bit more.
Yeah.
Emotionally. But then I think we just took the bull by the horns, as they say, and just decided to contact our local authority and see where that would go. And we kind of never looked back since, really.
They couldn't have been more welcoming.
Yeah.
It was the total opposite. They were ready for us, and that definitely then, I think, firmed up that we were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And it was very intrusive, the whole process of adopting. Having a social worker come to your house, assess every single part of your life. Want to interview any significant partner you had previous to the relationship you were in. All that kind of stuff was very intrusive, but that was irrespective of whether we were an LGBT couple.
That was just for anyone adopting.
Or not, for anyone adopting. And I guess, in hindsight, actually knowing in most cases, children that are adopted in the UK are in the care system for a reason. They probably have had a lot of early life trauma. So I guess it is right that they do have that level of diligence to ensure that child is placed in a loving, safe environment.
Yeah.
We had some fun with work as well, with going on adoption leave. So my pay slip actually said maternity leave, my pay. I've still got
And did they kind of recognize how bizarre that was?
Yeah, they did actually. I think the company I worked with at the time, they were very supportive. I was the first gay person in the company to take adoption leave. There would have been females take adoption leave previously. The adoption leave policy was set up to mimic the maternity policy. So it was the same pay, same entitlements and everything, which was great. There was equality there.
Except in name.
Except in name. I was guiding them through the process. So there was definitely a lack of awareness and education. Even simple things. I remember the policy allows you to start your adoption leave a month before your child is placed with you to prepare for the child coming. My manager found that very bizarre because I was needed in work. So it was just those little things that was bizarre. All of the literature I was giving or supports I was given was about a new mom. So, that there'd be a new moms club in the organization, that kind of stuff. So it started to change. I took adoption leave. When I returned from adoption leave, again, that was a very interesting experience because I guess the whole flexible working, thinking about childcare, that kind of stuff, I think because it was a man asking for that as a primary carer, they just processed it a little bit differently. And we hear a lot about the glass ceiling with women and the inequality with women in the workplace. I don't know what that feels like, obviously, but that was the closest that I could probably describe it when I spoke to female colleagues. There was times I felt that I was treated differently because I was a parent and I was the primary carer. And some of it was positive discrimination. Some of it was done in a way that was to protect me. I remember once not being invited to a meeting because it was likely to go past 5 p.m. And I would leave at 5 to 5 to grab the tram to go pick my child up from childcare. And it wouldn't have looked right, me walking out of the meeting early.
Yeah.
Just bizarre stuff like that. You're thinking, give me the choice. Invite me to the meeting or have a conversation.
Just let me know.
Let me know. So just
don't make it for
little
me.
things, just little details. And then we adopted our second child in 2015. Mackenzie was 4 years old when he came to live with us. And that took about a year to adopt Mackenzie.
Did you have to go through the exact same process again, or because you were already
It was
parents?
a little bit similar, but not really as intrusive.
Okay.
And it was more about making sure as a family and that with Adam, that it was going to all gel and work. So yeah, it was a lot quicker, a lot easier. I took the maternity leave, or whatever you want to say. I took that time. So from my job, and again, it was quite similar. It was like a lot of even then in those years. It was very similar to what the leaflets and the things and the support there, and even applying for it on the system and stuff like that. It was quite similar, but it has changed. But yeah, so it was interesting.
Yeah, I definitely find things have changed a lot, even in the last maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at simple forms and things with work, they're starting to move away from being so gendered. But a lot of times you will still come up against a form that it's like, well, we only have a space for mother and father, so which one are you going to be?
Oh yeah, we've had lots of those questions. Yeah.
Who's mum? Basically.
Who's mum?
One of you pick and put your name in the box.
And have you had that experience before, where you've been forced to?
Yeah. So we actually moving back to Cork, we had to register our children for PPS numbers. And that was fun in itself anyway, irrespective of gender. So we had to get our PPS numbers reactivated, having been away for so long, had to go in and provide all the necessary IDs, etc. Then we had to make an appointment to bring our kids to get their PPS numbers. So you're in the social welfare office, and this is pre-COVID, those offices can be busy at times, and you're queuing up, and it's pretty much kind of open counters. So we get there, and there was definitely a lack of awareness and a lack of tact as well. The process was designed around what's mom's name. Well, no, there's no mom, it's daddy and dad, and there's the adoption cert. Okay, but I need mom's details as well. I need the birth cert. There's the adoption cert, and we brought our court papers with us as well to say, that there's the court order that firmed up our adoption.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part of it's one thing when you're dealing with it as a parent, but because we were getting the kids registered as well, they have to physically be there.
And how
So
old were they at that stage?
Adam was 7.
was 13,
Oh, he was
9.
9.
He was
Sorry,
9.
Wow, so
So he's
Yeah.
well aware,
Yeah.
and you know these things are being asked in front of him, which was that was quite hard. To, you know, you're listening to somebody who is insistent that no, I need to see this. Well, you don't, because it's not one, it's none of your business, and two, you definitely don't need to see
You
it.
don't see it.
And you kind of having a 9-year-old looking at you saying, well, why is the lady asking for this? And you're kind of having to deal with that and deal with somebody who's been intrusive for no.
And in the end, you know, she kept going to check to get some guidance, and in the end, it was like, right, well, I need to put one of you guys in the mom's section on the computer. Which one of you is going to be mom? Was the question. And I was just put my name. We just need to get this PPS number, and we need to get out of this office so that I can give the PPS number to school, and I can use that PPS number for everything else I need to use it for in everyday life. So that was quite tough. And as you say, with Adam, Mackenzie wasn't really aware of what was going on, but Adam, you know, it's those kind of things that. And Adam is very confident about being adopted. He's very confident that he's got a daddy and a dad. He's very, very confident that he had a birth mom and he had a birth family, and the reasons why he lives with us now. But even so, it's those things that there's just no need for in this day and age. You know, and even as he gets older, I guess one of the questions that does bother me every now and again when we, you know, when you phone up telephone banking or something, it's one of the security questions, and it is getting better. It's starting to change. But what's your mother's maiden name?
yeah.
And we now have a generation of children growing up. Especially those that will come from an LGBT or from a same-sex male couple family, that question it can be difficult. You know, that question can be, well, actually, what is my, you know, you can make up whatever name you want to make up for the answer, but it could go further than that and internalize in a way of, well, actually, what is my birth mom's maiden name? Or it can create other things. So that is something that I would love to start to see change in society, that we move away from those gender type questions.
Yeah. Do you know, I'd never even thought of that, because I suppose my kids are so young, they've never been asked that, but I wonder what would they answer if what's your mom's maiden name?
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
it's funny. I didn't even ever think that. And I know you did face like more difficulties when you moved back to Ireland, but we'll come to those a little later if that's okay. I'm going to come to you, Joe and Sarah. Would you be able to tell me a bit about maybe how you met, how you decided to have kids, and then how you kind of took those first steps?
Yeah, well, we met about 6 years ago, and we just, I think I'd kind of already knew that I'd like to have kids, so we had that conversation probably only about a year into our relationship.
Quite early on.
So yeah, we made an appointment with Waterstones in Cork, and it was kind of after that then we decided to get married as well, because I thought we should, you know, be nice to make the family and the commitment to each other. So I was 3 months pregnant when we got married. So yeah, it was quite a. We've had a positive experience with Waterstones. They were very
Inclusive.
yeah.
For both of us, yeah.
To the point where Sarah had to do tests for genetic reasons, which were going to obviously have no effect on the baby.
And HIV tests.
Yeah. But it just, it's to add to the inclusivity, I think, you know. And we were lucky enough to go first time, which was a bit of a shock, to be honest, because everyone else I knew who'd done it had spent a couple of years trying to get pregnant. And it's been...
So Ada was born 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So in terms of legislation in the country, she was born before the commencement of the Children and Family Relationships Act, which had complications. So at that time, I suppose we had been tracking the media, and I suppose to bring it back a bit, when we did go to Waterstones, when it came to choosing a donor so that we could become a family, legislation was in limbo at that point, and we were advised that the legislation was going to change. They didn't know exactly when, but for that reason they advised us to use what they call a non-anonymous donor, so a known donor, so someone who could be identified or contacted. And we had originally, I suppose, we had chosen a donor who was anonymous, and we changed our minds, and that was a hurdle in itself, because I think there's maybe an assumption, or maybe I'm wrong in this, that you have this huge choice of donors, and the reality is that you spend weeks deciding on. You look at their
Ridiculous
grandparents'
profiles.
medical and what their interests are and their features and everything, and you come back with 10 suggestions, and then they go and investigate. And the reality is that only 1 or 2 of those are available, because a donor can only be used twice in the country, or certain things don't match. So we were quite limited. So we were quite disappointed that we couldn't go with the first donor. Anyway, we decided to fulfill the criteria with not knowing how legislation was going to go. So we picked a donor who ticked those boxes, so that our daughter would be able to, in time, we would be able to register both of us as a parent.
So you were aware, kind of going into the pregnancy, that you wouldn't be recognised as a parent when she was born?
We knew it was changing.
I don't think there was that full awareness.
No.
We knew that
You
it
had
might
an
be
idea.
tricky.
Partly just because of the process as Waterstones, they informed us.
Yeah.
They didn't really know.
Yeah.
Everything they were whenever
Don't
they
think
learned
anyone
something.
knew at
no.
that time.
So they were like, look, you can go with this donor, but we don't know if you'll be able to use it in 6 months' time or for a second child.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, oh, okay. And just, we just to make life simple, we just said, okay, let's just be smart about it. And
also, look, we were just married. We were having our first baby. You're caught up in that amazing bubble of we're going to have. And it kind of took a backseat. It wasn't really till Ada arrived that, we encountered the challenges. So fast forward to, Ada arrives exactly on her due date, which is unheard
That's
of. And
really unheard of.
Yeah, on the hottest day of the year in CUMH out the road.
she'll
And
never be on time again, I'd say.
like you were in labour for days. We slept in a car in the car park in Wilton Shopping Centre, because she was too early to be admitted, and we lived 100 kilometres away, and they sent us away, which is a whole other thing. But what I will say, as a woman experiencing my wife go through birth, like, I will never ever forget that. In terms of how the hospital treated us as a same-sex couple, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I'm out 20 years. I came out in the 90s. I had a very different experience than Joe, who came out a bit later in life. So I carry all that kind of wounds, or that paranoia of how I'm going to get treated. But, they were amazing, and I was there for every minute of it. We have another baby on the way. It may not be that way this time in terms of me being able to be there, because firstly, we'll have a child at home. Secondly, because of COVID. But yeah, that whole experience, like, it was
only when we
elation.
It was only when we went to register her birth.
Yeah.
In our naivety, because the law had gone past.
We'd read stuff in the newspapers.
When was she born?
She was born in June
2019.
So it had, they'd passed it, so it was in the newspapers before. So we were like, great. And so Sarah actually just crossed out father and just put mother. And went in there, and she's like, well, we can't do that. And that was a real blow.
And look, I'll be very honest here. Ada's in her arms, and I was unconsolable.
Yeah.
Like,
because we were like, but it's
especially if you thought
the
that
media
it
are
was gonna
saying
be
this
okay,
is
yeah.
allowed
we had
now,
read
so
that
what's
the law had
problem?
been
Yeah.
written. I mean, we understand now that it hadn't been commenced, and I work in legislation. I get that, but at that time, I think sometimes the media they're a bit trigger happy, and they put these headlines out there. But the reality was is that things weren't lined up yet.
Also, they didn't have a clue about it. Like, they were like, oh, it's in the newspaper. Like, they didn't even know.
And they
Because
didn't
it's,
even know
we're in a
they-
rural
Yeah.
village town. And so, we were having to explain to them, no, this law passed.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't even say, oh, yeah, but it hasn't gone, been implemented or whatever.
I
So-
think that's been a huge problem throughout the years with the media, and I see it every couple of months. There will be a big push and a headline, and the amount of people that will get in touch with me and say, congratulations, everything's fixed.
Yeah, yeah.
And every time, and this has been happening since like 2016,
Yeah,
2017,
yeah.
2018, 2019, and it actually wasn't commenced
No.
until 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even at that, it only covers some families.
Exactly.
So maybe
Absolutely.
could you explain to people listening, like who is and isn't covered under the current legislation?
I think, we're a good example because within our family, so Joe's sister and her wife are married and they have 2 kids, and they went about having a family in a different way. So they used a known donor, but they didn't go through a clinic, and their kids are a little bit older.
Yeah.
If you want to talk a bit more on their experience.
Yeah, so Luca is 8 now, and their daughter is 5, I think. So yeah, they used an own donor within this country, and yeah, so there was no even, I don't even think it was even in the pipeline that the law would come through then. I'm not quite sure.
So it's 2015 when they first signed it into law, but
I'm not. Yeah. So they just basically hired a solicitor and they just tried to do it as legally as possible.
So
And
they drew up a donor agreement.
yeah, they had a child each, so they're basically guardians of each other's child, even though they're their own children.
So they're not legal parents to each other,
No.
to their other children.
And my sister's wife is American, so there's that extra complication. And because my family are from the UK, there's the whole Brexit even complicated that again. So yeah, they're just going to have to see how that changes, because theirs is, again, it's not even it's not reciprocal IVF, it's not, adoption. It's like, it's a whole other thing. It's someone they were introduced to help them, and
yeah, it's a non-clinical conception with a known donor.
So that's going to be, that's going to be interesting. And then for us, it was 18 months after Ada was born that we finally got. I was ringing courts, and they were like, we don't even know what you're talking about, basically. And this is when it has been implemented. And
I think we started in maybe September of last year.
Yeah, it took a while.
And it took till Christmas.
And it's disheartening when they're like, you're explaining it and they go, oh, yeah, we'll ring you back then when we've got all the information. Literally printing off the legislation. Yeah. And then, of course, you don't hear anything. And so Sarah got in contact with
Kate in Link. So Link is a resource centre here for lesbians and bisexual women in Cork. And Kate, I guess she advocated on behalf of us, and she had helped another couple in a different area in Cork. So she kind of clarified what we needed to do, and we said, look, we've been phoning and we're kind of getting passed from person to person. So she took it on herself, and she got us in touch with the right person. So we live in West Cork, so it was Clonakilty District Court, I guess you'd call it, that we needed to go to, and she found the right person to talk to. And I think she was that link between it. We weren't getting anywhere, and through that help, we got a court date.
He took it upon himself, this guy, to educate himself, and he was like, "I'm going to get you in before Christmas, because wouldn't it be a nice present for your daughter to have 2 mums by Christmas?" And he was really good, like typical West Cork man. There was nothing. I'd say he'd never dealt with anything like it before, and when we got it all sorted, he was like, anyone else who needs help, just give them my number and I will get them through. And he has. And
he was, look, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I think at one point he called me your partner, and he corrected himself. He said, I'm sorry, your wife. And that is amazing. And like, I shouldn't even have to comment on that, but he tried to do his best with it.
Yeah.
One thing, I suppose, it has been amazing, and we are incredibly grateful that we were able to go through the court. And your sister and her wife can't right now, but we talked about this on the way up. One thing I'd like to say, that the court experience, it brought out an awful lot of emotions for me. It was supposed to be such an amazing day for us that I would get recognised. We already had a birth cert. You'll be familiar with this. It just had a mother. The other side was blank. So the whole point of us going there, the end goal was to get Ada's birth re-registered, and that I was recognised. So that for that 18 months, if anything had happened, Joe, I wouldn't have had any rights over Ada, even though we were married and we embarked on this together. So the court date itself, the court clerk, I think, his idea was that he would get us in first and keep us away from the other people that were in court that day. So it was a family court day. But when we got there, the judge decided he wanted to see us last, so we had to sit there for hours, basically. And I'll never forget this, and it's tainted the experience for me. We sat and waited with a handcuffed prisoner to go in to ask a judge, was it okay for me to be a parent? And it just brought up so much for me. The whole day was ruined for me. Even after it, when we got out, I was furious and upset and angry that we were put in that afternoon session with someone who was being brought from a prison to in front of a judge. And then when we got in front of the judge, I think for him, we were the first same-sex couple in West Cork to look for this. And we had our paperwork. We had a paperwork from the clinic to say that we had embarked on this together and that I had given you permission to use this donor to, it was all very legal. We were married. We had affidavits and everything. And I had to justify why I should be allowed to be my child's parent. And, we had to explain who we were. And, we had to say that we were married. And there are lots of people in this country, and this is something close to my heart, who I don't necessarily ever think they think through being a parent and may not necessarily, they're not the best candidates to be parents. But as a 42-year-old woman, I had to stand in front of a judge and explain that I was married to a woman and why I should get parental rights over a child that I had cared for 18 months and loved long before she arrived into our family. And that is something that I don't think anyone should have to go through. We're very lucky. Jo is 5 months pregnant now. We have our next child, who will be 100% DNA match. We've used the same donor to Ada Rose, our daughter, is due in the beginning of December, and we won't have to go through that process of going to the courts and almost begging, to be allowed to be my child's parent. We won't have to go through that, which is amazing. But there are so many other couples who don't even have that option. And within our family, and it's very close to our hearts, it was amazing to be able to get that for Ada Rose. But your sisters are stuck in limbo. And I think, Kevin, hearing your story here today, we said that, we don't know any same-sex male couples in West Cork, but it's a minefield. And we're very lucky that we were able to get it eventually. But the experience we've had has just touched on so many issues and triggers, and it's hard not to be upset when I think back, but I try to focus on the fact that, I came out, I left Ireland at 17 in 1996. I came out not long after, and I talked about this on our wedding day. I was 18 when I realised I was gay, living in England, and I was immediately had this recognition of that's why I've always been different. But in that same second had this, that means I'm never going to be married, I'm never going to have kids. So in my lifetime, we've come to that there's been a huge social change in Ireland. But it's just still quite challenging. And when we talk to our heterosexual friends who are having kids, they can't believe what we have to go through. And I think by talking about this today, just bringing awareness that we're the luckier ones, but yet our experience was really tough. But there are so many other same-sex couples out there who have massive hurdles to overcome that it's going to take a long time for that to be resolved. Hopefully it can be.
I think it's definitely really important to recognise how far we've come, because we have come so far. But I think one of the really frustrating things is that a lot of people think that everything is fine now. Yeah. And a lot of people, and even ourselves, myself, my wife, when we were having our first child, we thought that we would both be recognised because we were married at that point, and we were like, well, marriage equality sorted everything out. So, it's going to be grand. And it really wasn't. So it's really focusing in on that yes, we have made huge strides, and we do have families who now can have that legal recognition even from birth, which is incredible. But we have so many families who can't and have no option. And I'm sure looking at your nieces and nephews, how can you possibly look at, two sets of children and say, well, these ones are worthy of having both legal parents, and there's no difference.
The same decision process was there at the beginning. We want to have kids. It's a big, it's a big decision. It's not something done lightly. Yeah, it's all the same. It should be the same process. Or I mean, now it's just
Yeah.
you just got to put parents down on the forms, and everything would be sorted.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter how a child was conceived,
No.
where they were born, the sexuality or gender of their parents. It shouldn't matter.
No.
There's a lot more than DNA to being a parent.
Oh,
Absolutely,
all know.
and we see that because Joe carried Ada Rose, and we use a donor, and she is a total clone of you to look at her. But the older she gets, I definitely see my personality, and I think we talked about this at the beginning of our journey, and for a number of reasons. I'm older than Joe. I was like 40 when we started in the clinic. It wasn't really an option for a number of reasons. We weren't going to try, but yeah, she might be your DNA, but there's no, this nature nurture thing is amazing. But yeah, I mean, the only other thing it has been a very difficult financially. I mean, we haven't even gone there. That is a massive burden on people, and I don't think it's always an option for people to go to a clinic. And this is where the legislation is discriminatory, because if you don't go through a clinic, you don't fulfill that. But on the other side of it, we had to make a choice on whether we wanted a family or a house, as in a mortgage. And
I think a lot of people have had to make that decision.
We've spent a house deposit on getting to where we are now with 1.5 kids, and I don't regret it for a second, but not everybody has to have that, But then it's definitely all worth it, and everything we've been through, and it has been extremely difficult, in that moment, like having a daughter. I never thought I'd have a wife, not to mention a daughter, and to have a second one. It's the most amazing thing in the world, and anyone now I hear is about to become a parent, it's a cliche, but I do think you see the world. Your experience of life is different once you're a parent, and for all the negatives and for all the challenges, it has been and still is the most rewarding thing that I have ever done in my life. And I've achieved a lot in terms of sporting life in younger years, and education. I became a doctor this year. Finished my PhD.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But all of those things are kind of irrelevant. Like, having Ada Rose has been the pivotal thing in my life. There's nothing that comes close, and I hope in time every couple, no matter what their background is, has that opportunity, and there shouldn't be these hurdles because of legislation, and something really does need to change.
Takes all the romance out of it.
Just for anyone listening, because some people might still be kind of unclear on who is and isn't covered under the CFRA. So you are covered because you're a same-sex female couple. You've used an Irish fertility clinic to conceive. You've used an identifiable sperm donor, and your child and your next child will be born in Ireland.
Yes.
And that's why you qualify.
Yes.
So who isn't covered? It's, those who use known donors.
Known donors.
Non-clinical conception.
Reciprocal IVF.
So reciprocal IVF is covered.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
It now is. It wasn't originally.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
It is now. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
But
Foreign clinics, is that covered?
Foreign clinics are not. So
Okay.
I suppose and this is where it gets a bit complicated. If you conceived before May of last year and you used a foreign clinic or you used an anonymous donor, but the child was still born in Ireland, then you are covered under a sort of amnesty.
Right.
But going forwards, for anyone who's thinking of becoming a parent, it's same-sex female couple, Irish clinic, identifiable donor, and the child has to be born in Ireland.
Yeah.
And everybody else is left out. So obviously anyone who maybe is living abroad and decides to come home, anyone who uses a non-clinical method, known donors, or even if you've kind of ticked all those boxes, but then for whatever reason your child is born in another country, say you get a job opportunity, you won't be covered. And then obviously the big cohort of people who aren't covered are same-sex male couples who use surrogacy. So there's a huge proportion of our rainbow families who still have no option for both parents to have that legal connection to
Yeah.
their children. I'm going to come back to you, Kevin and Kevin, if that's okay. Because I know when you moved back to Ireland, you had a bit of trouble accessing citizenship for your children, is that right? And why was that?
Yeah, so when we adopted our children in the UK as a same-sex couple, because of the Children and Families Relations Act wasn't in place at the time, the Irish Adoption Authority didn't recognise our adoption in Ireland, so our children weren't entitled to Irish citizenship. Had we been a heterosexual couple and one or both of us being Irish, they would have recognised the British adoption through the Irish Adoption Authority, and then we could have got an Irish passport. We were unable to do that until 2017, which is when again, coming back to what Joe and Sarah mentioned about the media putting stuff out there, and obviously 2015, everything was hunky-dory, but it was 2017 before that was enacted, and we were able to apply for a passport. Now, in the main, like over the years, I think what was challenging, and you touched on a point, I think, Joe, earlier about kind of not having a right to the child. Now, we did have full legal rights to the child, but during that period, if we had lived in Ireland, and we lived in Ireland briefly from the end of 2016 to 2017, I guess technically, in the eyes of the state, we were not recognised as a family. Now, the legislation was there and it was coming through, so there was no risk. But I guess going back to 2010, when we adopted Adam first, if we had moved back to Ireland, it would have been a very, very different country then. We didn't have the marriage equality. And friends and family, which have always been very, very supportive of everything that we've done, would say things like, "Oh, sure, you'll be fine. Sure, it'll be grand, and sure, they'll be welcome here, and they'll go into school, and there'll be no hassle." And that's in the main probably very, very true, because I think Ireland definitely, God, we're so progressive now. We've become so inclusive, and even when we're not, I still think we put our arms around things and we look after them. But not everybody could understand that. Actually, no, I didn't feel that we could leave here. Yeah,
You wouldn't feel protected just being here, not knowing that there was legal protections in place. And like if anything happened in the morning, it's about making sure your kids are going to be okay in society as they grow up. So yeah, I think that made us nervous about ever returning home. We never thought we would return back to Ireland. But I think once the legislation did change and marriage equality was passed and stuff like that, you could see Ireland was becoming very progressive. And that kind of swayed us to moving back.
maybe a bit of Brexit thrown in there as well. I think it was a clear signal that we were welcome, our family was welcome, Ireland was starting to get ready for us, and I can honestly say, we've not looked back.
No, I think we were very nervous, as anybody would be, uprooting two kids, from what they know, what we know, giving up a career, becoming a full-time stay-at-home parent, and coming back. So yeah, there was, it was a nervous time, but I can honestly say the kids made our decision a lot easier because they settled so well and they adapted, and they, the school they went to and things was just so welcoming. There was no, I think we were more caught up about being gay parents back here than a lot of other people were. And especially.
And how did you make that decision for school? Because I know that can be a tricky one for.
We were lucky. We chose the Educate Together, and that's where we kind of went with. And their ethos made it a lot easier for us. And it was
non-denominational. It's not religious.
It's just like, teachers are on their first name terms with the students and stuff, and it's just. Yeah, it's from when I think back to when I went to school, it's completely different, and it's just the welcomingness and the support and stuff that's there.
And they're so inclusive of everything, irrespective of gender, sexuality, race, religion, whatever it is. They're so inclusive, and I know a lot of other schools are as well. But Probably touching a little bit, Joe, on what you said earlier, that's still some of that stuff that's probably internalized from being younger, and when you were made to feel it was not okay to be gay, it wasn't okay to be who you were, and society, made you feel that way, and I guess running away to the UK gave you that space and that breather and being able to do that. So coming home and possibly considering sending our kids to a school that has a religious patronage to it didn't sit too right with us. Again, we weren't sure what does that mean. Would they have to make their first Holy Communion? They're not even baptized. We don't really practice religion in our family unit, so we were unsure. I'm sure the schools would have been amazing, and we hear lots of positive things about Catholics and Protestant schools today. But I can honestly say that with everything else going on, with trying to battle to get their adoption recognised, trying to get them an Irish passport, trying to get the lady in the PPS office to key my name into the mother's box so we could just get the PPS number, at least we didn't have the challenges of school. And even from day one, that application form for that school was parent 1, parent 2, and
As it should be.
and as it should be, because we must, this isn't even just about LGBT. There's children that are in the care system today, have foster parents. There's children, maybe mom is no longer with them. There's lots of children out there that for whatever reason we need to be a little bit more sensitive when it comes to paperwork for those children. But the school have absolutely been amazing. We're the first same-sex male couple in that school. And we're really fortunate now that our son is moving on to the Educate Together secondary school this year. I'd love to see more Educate Togethers around the country. I'm probably a bit of an advocate for them. It's quite sad of a city the size of Cork that we only have one Educate Together secondary school in the whole city. And even at that, they're still in temporary accommodation. So it's, I'd like to see more of those. We've just been lucky with where we live, that we've been in that catchment area to get our child into that school.
Could I ask you if you could speak to yourselves 10 years ago before or 13 years ago before you started down this road, what do you wish you knew? Like, what would you say to anyone who's about to embark on their own first steps towards becoming a parent?
I think never lose faith, never lose hope, and always think positively. Whatever your darkest day is, there's always hope there, and never give up on that. I think what we have to remember as well is to see how far we have come. We would never have come this far if it wasn't for previous generations to ours. So we're constantly, there's a journey constantly happening, and we have to keep that. We have to keep that going. To make sure inclusion is there and everybody's equal, basically.
I think we have to continue to advocate because, it's thinking of the male same-sex couples today in Ireland, they don't really have that many options. And to adopt a child in Ireland is quite difficult as it is. Most adoptions in Ireland are international adoptions, which come with other challenges for LGBT couples, depending on the jurisdiction you're going to adopt from. And does that mean that we're going to see more male couples? We left because Ireland wasn't ready, or I didn't feel Ireland was ready for me to come out to be gay, 20 years ago, and that's why we left. But are we going to see same-sex male couples leave now? Because let's go live in England for a couple of years and adopt a child, and then come back. It shouldn't be that way. They should have more options available to them, be it through surrogacy or whatever route that family decides to go. But I think maybe back to your question, if 13 years ago or so, if we could speak to ourselves again, I think definitely
be confident.
Be confident and doing our homework as well. I think specifically for adoption, because it became an option, we had rose-tinted glasses on, and most kids do have some early life trauma. I suppose we've been just on a journey with that of understanding that as it arises now, and how we deal with that and what that looks like, and how we support our child and both of our children. So I would have taken a little bit more time, dig in, get a lot more information. It still wouldn't have changed anything, and I wouldn't swap either of them for the world. Maybe, you know,
Some days.
some days, you know. Although we were talking earlier about teenagers, yeah, take me back to the terrible twos and the testing trees. Yeah,
No.
We'll swap. I'll send you a 2-year-old. And coming back to you two, if you had a hope for, you know, something to happen in Ireland in the coming years to progress rights for all families, like what would you like to see happen?
Well, I suppose that any of the younger generation don't have to go through these things. That, you know, if they have to use fertility clinics, that it's not such a. It's very expensive, and it's heartbreaking for a lot of it. So that, you know, you don't want to have to be worrying about money, so that things like that become easier, whether it's whatever in tax rebates or whatever, and that they don't have to worry about all these ridiculous paperwork issues. I mean, paperwork is such a stupid thing to be worrying about, that it just, you can make a decision about how you want to have children and when, and be able to do it in as, you know, whatever the natural way of having kids is for you. I mean, I don't feel like we had kids unnaturally. We had it the way we needed to have them, and it was beautiful in its own way. And I, you know.
Well, the paperwork bit is funny because, you know, I've got the other side of the coin to you, because I have to apply for paternity leave now for the birth of our next child, and it's paternity leave. And I can see HR calling maternity leave, and I'm like, well, it's not maternity leave, because my wife is going on maternity leave and I'm going on paternity leave, as it's called by the Department of Social Welfare or whatever. But yeah, I think there have been some very progressive changes with Parent 1 and Parent 2. I think school forms are having to change, because it's awkwardness on their part when they're, you know, sometimes they don't even think like that because they haven't had to. But there's a slow change happening. I still come back to, you know, Tessa and Liz's situation, that in the one family that we have different rights and we have a different experience.
And I hope it doesn't affect those kids, you know, their kids.
Yeah. And I think, look, I work for the government, and I didn't for a long time, and I said I never would, and I do now for family reasons, and that was a decision when we were going to have kids. I used to work away abroad. I'd be in Africa for weeks at a time, and when we decided to embark on a family, I changed that. So I went to work for the government, good steady job, pension, permanent, all those boring things that when you're younger you think, oh, I don't need them, but we needed them as a family. And I see the pace government works at, snail pace, and if a decision is made, it doesn't mean that it's actually going to be implemented, or it will be operationalized for 18 months to 2 years, which is quite fast. And there are all these things that need, first of all, government will, and things like having a gay Taoiseach, or he's Taoiseach at the moment. These things are definitely helping our cause, but there's no getting away from it. Government, the pace of things is the issue here, and government and legislation hasn't caught up with the changes that are happening in our society, and I don't know what the solution is to that. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a quick fix solution. I think it could be another 10 years before we have the type of equality that we need. I think we're going in the right direction. It's just too slow.
There's always going to be something more important. You know, everyone's going to have something that's more important, but I think it needs to be put to the forefront for the sake of the kids, really. I mean,
well, we're not talking
we'll
about
get over.
Yeah, we're not
stuff,
talking about theoretical children. We're talking about kids who are here and who exist,
and they deserve equality now.
Yeah, just because they're, you know, kids doesn't mean, and they don't understand it maybe.
Yeah.
But like Ada doesn't understand it, but she still deserves the right to have 2 mums on a piece of paper, you know.
Yeah, and if she saw her first birth cert, I'm invisible on that. There's no mention of me, and all that is ahead of us when it comes to, you know, how come that person has a dad and I don't, and how did I, you know, and we have had many chats about, when we come to it, age appropriate, what we'll explain to her. But yeah, I think there is an awful lot to do. And the key thing for people to hear is just because you see it in a newspaper doesn't mean that it's where we're at. And it took me when we tried to register me from day one on ADAS, and I have no problem. I phoned TDs, I got onto head people in government departments, and I made my voice known, and I suppose I know what to do to find out the information, and I don't think everybody maybe has that capacity or has that ability to do that.
And why would they?
Yeah.
You know, people shouldn't have to.
We don't need
You
to
know,
understand legislation on a daily basis.
Unless that's your job.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we do now.
I know. Yes.
you know, we know the ins and outs of it, and we know how complicated it is. But yeah, it adds to the complications that we've had to
And
becoming
I also
parents.
think for the future, I would like, as you said, for schools, there should be. I mean, there's no Educate Together
In
that I know
West
of where we
Cork,
live.
Yeah.
Now, not to say they're very welcoming. My nieces and nephews, none of them practice religion in the schools, and it's fine. They don't mind at all. So, you know, but it would be nice to know that that wasn't even needed to be a concern, that we don't need to worry, you know.
And it would be nice to have an alternative.
Yeah.
I think just, you know, that you can look at a different.
And in West Cork, I mean, there's one secondary school that I don't think they're an Educate Together, but I don't think they have any religion in them. But it's actually quite far away. Like schools are far away when you live in the countryside, so there's no chance we'd be sending her there unless we moved.
So our way around that at the moment is, you know, we're putting her name down in a number of schools.
Everywhere.
And when it comes to it, and we'll see what type of child she is and what suits.
Yeah.
But look, I went to a Catholic primary school and I went to a convent secondary school, and whether I'm gay or straight, I would like to avoid my child going to that Catholic ethos. But it's more difficult in a rural area, and we live in the country for different reasons, and we like the lifestyle down there, but it comes at the cost of having less of a choice in terms of non-denominational schools. And we're a bit behind you guys, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
So just to end on a high note, could you both tell me what is your favourite thing about being a parent?
Ooh.
For me, I think it's that she's just this thing that you just love, you know. And then, you know, she has her moments of tantrums, but then you look at her and you're like, she's just our little perfect being.
Yeah, I mean, look, she drives me nuts, like she does, but she's my number one source of pride, and we're here today because of Cork Pride, and I am so proud to be her parent. And like I said, it just doesn't come close to any getting the best job or buying this or achieving anything. It's just, it's priceless. And you know, when she learns a new word, I just want to like squeeze her.
Genius.
And yeah, you know. And you're obviously biased as a parent, but it's just that I feel massively privileged to be a mother.
They show you
when
the
I
simple,
spent most of my life thinking I wasn't going to be a mother or a wife.
and they show you the simple joys in life. It's not about,
Yeah.
you know, the big things. It's just.
I mean, she's making me like musicals, and I hate musicals.
And I love them.
I mean, Frozen is on in our car, in our house, on my phone, on a laptop. Yeah, those things. She's changed me and softened me in ways that I never thought. Yeah, so for me it's pride. That I'm so proud to be a mother and a parent, and to have this opportunity. There's nothing better.
And what about you two? What is your favourite thing about being a parent?
I think it's just seeing them be happy. I think it's seeing that little smile. Even when like our eldest, who's 13, he still every morning has a smile on his face. Now that might only last 2 minutes because he could be screaming at me the next.
Yeah.
Because he's learning new words too. At that time.
Entirely different sorts of words.
But yeah, so I think it's seeing that there's a child there that you're responsible for getting this far in life, and I don't think we would always be responsible for them, even when they're older and stuff. But yeah, just getting them so far and seeing them achieve, and yeah, being proud as well. I think you're always proud of them. And I suppose the only downside of parenting is my hair is going greyer, and it's it's you know, it's happening, and you know, I never thought that would happen, and yeah, so
they're amazing. You know, I think the two of them, you know, seeing them grow up, Adam and Mackenzie, it's just, I think going back to what Joe and Sarah said as well, it's, I don't know, I'm so proud that we're sitting here in 2021, you know, for Cork Pride, openly gay husbands, children, and I never thought we'd sit here. I honestly didn't think that this would ever happen all those years ago, and it was almost feeling that you'd have a miserable existence if you did come out. But you had to be who you want to be, so it's great to be proud, but equally we're raising our children today that they can be whoever they want to be. And we're trying to be as gender neutral as possible about things, even simple things of, oh, you're all dressed up today, you're trying to impress a girl at school. It's, you know, you're all dressed up today. Is there somebody you're trying to impress in school? You know, because we're in society, that's what we do. We opposite gender the whole time. So no, absolutely so proud of who they are and what they might be in the future. And again, we can't forget, not that we want to get there, but we have the next generation to come yet where we're going to be same-sex grandparents, possibly. way off, but
time now,
way off. But it's, and that's why government and legislation and society has to catch up at a quicker pace so we can all get there and enjoy it and be inclusive.
Well, that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, Kevin and Joe and Sarah, for sharing your experiences. I'm sure everyone listening is going to benefit so much from just hearing such a real side to LGBTQ plus parenting in Ireland. So thank you.
Thank you.
A pod is a power of difference group, and it actually gives you the power to actually make a difference.
Our pod drives business impact specifically in the areas of recruitment, development, and retention. For recruitment, we provide a face of VMware in public events such as at pride parades or job fairs. For development opportunities, volunteering in the pod gives employees the chance to step up and lead and get experience. And for retention, we make sure that people feel safe at VMware, engaged, and that they want to stay at VMware. They can bring their whole self to work each and every day, and that they're empowered to step up and lead.
Recently, our pod was able to provide impact by helping someone that was transitioning. We were asked by Diversity and Inclusion to give feedback how to make this a positive experience as we developed a transgender policy and how this looked for our company.
Our community drives business impact by affecting change for the LGBT community, for the employees and their families, whether it's providing additional benefits, gender-neutral restrooms, whatever it may be. We are a voice and an advocate for this entire diverse community within VMware.
VMware enables a culture of possibility by letting us come to work as who we are. VM inclusion is a huge piece of that puzzle. It makes it clear to me that VMware wants us to grow as individuals, not just in the workplace, but as leaders and as humans. Come join us and participate. Pick a pod, any pod, and show up.
It's easy to get involved with a pod. You can look at our social cast page and see what's going on in our pod as far as activities go. You can sign up to receive proactive updates. You can even volunteer with us, so reach out to one of our pod members and ask how to join our pod core team. Or you can simply show your support in the community by sharing events that are happening and coming out and having fun with us.